an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows. Season 1, Episode 6, Baron's Night Out. In this episode, the Baron starts out wanting all the vampires to take over humanity, but then he starts to seriously reconsider his priorities and ask himself, why? What motivates me? Why do I think this is something that I want? And I think we could all stand to take a leaf out of his book. Not the blood-sucking part, but the introspection part. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Robin for commissioning this episode. What's up, Robin? If you're in the chat here. So this episode was really fun. I wasn't sure what to expect. I assumed that the premise, the title of it being Baron's Night Out, and it being the Baron insisting that they take him out to see the sights, have a night on the town. That's pretty much what I was estimating would probably happen. But the Baron's sort of softening up as the evening went on was not something that I expected. I wasn't really sure how it was going to go. I almost wondered if the Baron was going to get them in trouble with other vampires, or if he was going to start some shit with werewolves, like they would run into some werewolves, there would be a whole thing. And instead, we get a series of weird interactions with regular people that kind of hammer home just how disconnected from regular life the Baron is. And then he gets drunk and stoned and loosens up a lot. And it was pretty fun. What I thought was sort of compelling about this idea is the Baron is really old, and he had never been to America before. I don't know how many places he's seen. Considering his age, the fact that he hasn't been to America at all, or at least hasn't seen much of it, but if I'm not mistaken, he says he's never even been. I can totally understand his feelings of just wanting to really, cut loose. I can only imagine when you reach a certain age, just as a human being, you get to a point where you must straight up not give a fuck anymore. And it seems like the Baron, I don't want to go so far as to say a midlife crisis, because it's past that. He is in a later stage of his life. And I think, even by vampire standards, that is definitely true. And just starts to realize, I'm not actually enjoying myself, so what am I doing? And I am 100% here for it. I loved it. I would, be down for vampires on the town for every episode. So we start off with Nandor asking Guillermo to get some of those things that humans use for smelling that rhyme with hoses. And Guillermo, understandably, says noses. But it turns out Nandor means roses. And this winds up being a chore that has some pretty magnificent repercussions later on in the episode. An errand that has a toll. And I should mention here how many small jokes there are throughout this episode that I'm never going to be able to talk about each one, but this felt like a really joke-dense episode. You know how some of them are like that? So anytime that I get one like this where it just feels like they keep coming and I'm still laughing at the previous joke to the point where I almost miss the next one, I'm always very impressed. Jokes are hard, and when you're doing a recurring bit, and by recurring bit, I mean vampires being fucking weirdos, I could see it getting old. But I could also see, if you have really talented writers, that being an endless wealth of possibility. It just depends whose hands it in. Whose hands it's in. There it is. And I keep being reassured by this show that it's in the correct hands, because they just really do find new ways to play with this whole idea. My one sort of, not even criticism, just like disappointment of the episode, we don't get another check-in with Vicky. Is it Vicky? I'm just realizing that I call her Vicky because that was the character I think the same actress played on Community. I didn't put it together. I think it's the same actress, though. Maybe I'm wrong. But, you know, the girl that got turned, and we had been sort of like following along as she began to transform, and we don't know where she's at. The last time we saw her, she had leapt off of a gurney and run back into her dorm room. So that's the only thing that I'm sort of curious about, is what's going on with her. I feel like we've been averaging about a check-in every other episode with her, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully the next one we'll get a little bit more information on her. But yeah, so this is a house meeting because they're trying to figure out what to do about the Baron. First of all, he ate one of their familiars, which was not something that they were planning on. Like, you know, they try and do this they have a certain way that they handle their feeding, obviously, and he just didn't really care about that. Also, I think there's a sort of understanding that it's a breach of etiquette. It's like eating off somebody else's plate. And taking somebody else's leftovers. And then they are all talking about how he's taking up a lot of space in the attic. They don't know when he's going to be leaving. He's been staying with them for a couple of weeks now, I think. And they have no real idea of what he's planning to do or when he's going to go. And I love that Nadja is just like, I'm not scared of him, really loudly, before the Baron's own familiar comes in. I had forgotten about this woman, the incredibly pinch-faced. I don't even know how to describe the expression on her face. And Nandor asks if he's awake, and she makes this like, it's a nod, but it also could look like she's just kind of gazing around the room. Like, and he just says, so was that a yes? I really love these little moments where none of them know what the fuck is going on. There's an imperiousness that's accepted in a lot of storytelling. But in this universe, that imperiousness is really seen as sort of like, I mean, Laszlo describes the Baron as being really old-fashioned, you know? So this whole bit is really fun. I enjoy a lot how Colin is sitting there and he can tell that the Baron is awake and sense his like emotional aura and says, oh yeah, he's very angry and it seems to be mostly pointed at you guys. I'm into it. And as it turns out, even Colin can be rendered like tolerable by getting drunk and stoned off of drunk stoned people blood. Which I really didn't know that there was a point at which anybody would be glad to see Colin, but there it is. Did you guys know that feeling? I have not gotten stoned often. As many of you know who are familiar with the show, I never even experimented with smoking weed until I was like in my mid-20s. And it didn't do a lot. Apparently, like for the first time, many people don't experience much of an effect. It's not either super noticeable or they don't inhale properly, whatever. And it wasn't until like the past couple of years that I tried using edibles as a means of dealing with my anxiety, which they're great for that. Just tip from me to you. CBD capsules, especially from R&R Meds, which have like a drop of THC in them, have been extremely helpful. But there is something to be said about being in an altered state, whether that be alcohol, drugs, a combination, that makes you just feel so much more goodwill for everybody, even people that you normally can't stand. And I wish so much there was a way to bottle that kind of tolerance. Because I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine about how, do you guys know the phenomenon of bitch eating crackers? This is like, when you say, oh, so-and-so's a bitch eating crackers at this point, what is meant by that is anything this person does, whatever it is, it could be something genuinely selfless and kind, you're going to look at sideways because you don't like them. And we were talking about how somebody being unlikable, you not liking someone, does not mean they're a bad person. We love to think that we only like good people and only dislike bad people, but it is never that simple. It's really hard. Sometimes you really genuinely like someone that you know isn't actually a good person. And there are people that you wish you liked more because you can tell that they're good-hearted, you can tell they mean well and that they're trying, and yet you just fucking can't, and there's just nothing to be done about it. I feel that way about several people in my life. And I wish so much that I could bottle this feeling of just like, hey, buddy, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. What's been going on with you anyway? Where you been? That general, openness of spirit. I wish that I could bottle that and have that in me all the time. Because there are some people that I know deserve that from me. But I just can't get past their fucking irritating ass personality. It's irritating to me in a particular way that I can't get past, that they can't alter, and I feel guilty about it. And there's that moment, at the end of this, where it's Nadja who's, greeting Colin, and it's just like, hey, we missed you, and he literally asks, what's wrong with you? I just felt that in my soul. I have had moments with people that I otherwise don't like, and I have felt this sort of, for lack of a better word, this brotherhood with them. Oh, you know what? We're all in this together, man. And I just want to be able to hold on to that in my everyday life. And some people can. And I am not able to do it. I have too much, my mind is too chatty and too willing to be yeah, but fuck them though. Drop of a hat, So anyway, I just really appreciated that later on in the episode. And I was like, wow, even Colin's somebody that they're all getting along with right now. Shit is really, they must be lit. So I love when they're talking about, the Baron at this point. I kind of want to share this. Hold on, guys. I'm going to screen share for those who are in the chat. So that you can see this illustration that I'm talking about, because that's one really fun thing about this show, is that they do those little cuts to artwork of the period. I'm assuming of the period. I actually don't know if it's accurate or if they are using a style that is of the period and it's just very convincing. I have been assuming this whole time that the only original artwork are the depictions of specifically Nadja, Laszlo, and Nandor, and that the rest of it is original artwork. Or not original, sorry. Well, I guess it's all original artwork. Artwork designed for the show is of the characters, and that everything else is actually period work. But I don't know that. I'm curious if anybody out there has information on that, if they particularly care, and by they, I mean the writers and designers of the show. They may be mixing and matching, throwing in some stuff that's done for the show and some period things as well. But they're talking about the Baron here. And Laszlo says, we used to have a really good time a few centuries ago with the Baron. He was a fun guy. And we get this illustration of a man sitting on this chair with a woman who is manacled, and she's not fully topless, but her neckline is pulled underneath her breasts, and he's stroking her face with a riding crop. And there's a, what do you call it? Something on the ground beside him next to his chair that says like justice. I can't tell if it's meant to be a political cartoon or what's going on here, but this was just one of the more spicy illustrations that they have used on this show, I feel like. Just very evocative. Just, you know. And when we cut back to, because this is brought up in response to Laszlo being like, we used to have a lot of fun with him, shows this like, you know, topless woman and the riding crop. And then it cuts to Nadja looking very pleased and saying, yes, we had a great time. And I love Laszlo saying he has turned into a fucking prick, which is ironic because he doesn't have one. I love Nadja describing his desire to take over humanity, which at first you're like, oh, that's a cool idea. But then after a while, it's like, sorry, why are we doing this? And that feels so real to me. The idea of completely dominating mankind is one of those things that always struck me for creatures like vampires as incredibly counterproductive to the well-being of vampires. You can't have power, like, in order to have power over humanity, you would need to have such numbers that I would think then you would grow into a competition with one another for prey. The secrecy forces you to have limited numbers, which gives you an ample hunting ground. So it's one of those things where I've always felt like, yeah, you can like kind of rule over human beings without them knowing that's what you're doing. And that feels like a bigger win to me, is being in power and the people who are your literal like cattle are just blissfully unaware that's what they are. And that just, to me, seems like the ideal situation. So whenever there's been these sorts of storylines where somebody wants to, like, subjugate humankind and make a bunch of them slaves, I'm like, I mean, if you live a long time and you have enough money because you've lived that long, and you have, like, superpowers like turning into animals, super speed, and mesmerization, they're your slaves already. Like, you don't need to do the extra thing, which is what it seems like everybody has sort of begun to realize, even the Baron later on. So they get summoned by him, and here goes a really good scene. They're talking about why they're being summoned, and the Baron comes out. Oh my god, there's this like flashing. I have to assume that what we're meant to think is that the Baron, or his, look at the face, look at her face, the face of his fucking familiar watching him. Either the Baron or his familiar, I'm assuming his familiar, has installed that kind of Halloween lighting in the roof. I swear to God, my slumber is complete. So this is when they begin to ask him, well, what was it that you were actually wanting to do? You said that you wanted to conquer all of humanity, but we didn't really know what that meant, what it is you're looking for. He says that he's hardly seen any of America, and Nadja offers to get him a television, which was not what I expected her to say. But I could understand why they would think that it wasn't a good idea for him to go outside in public. When Laszlo brings up a little bit of, what's the word I want? He's simply a little cautious, as he should be, about the fact that they don't think the Baron is going to be able to be in disguise. He gets lifted off his feet and slammed into the ceiling. So the Baron, at this point, reaches forward and grabs the sound guy from the documentary crew that is following them around. I really, really loved this, y'all. This was so I keep forgetting that the documentary crew is referenced within the episodes, because these, all of these episodes have been spaced fairly far apart, just far enough apart. I'm only on episode 6 right now. I have been covering this since, when was the first one? March. So it has been infrequent enough that I am forgetting, and it looks like I'm only booked to the next episode. So hopefully there's another one coming soon, because it's going to be out of options soon. The next episode isn't until September. Yikes. So it's going to be a minute. Just warning you guys. After this, there's going to be a long wait. But the fact that the documentary crew, I'm remembering now, got referenced in the scene where Nadja is going to speak to Victor. Gregor. Sorry, Gregor. I just really love this. He eats the sound guy, and they do this beautiful thing where they make the actual dialogue completely inaudible, or occasionally it pops in and then it goes again, to make it clear that the guy who did the sound is the one that's gone. I thought this was really clever. And their apologies to the guy who's filming, and they apologize more than once. They recognized what a complete breach this is. They're not horrified. They're embarrassed, This is like if your dog chewed up somebody's shoes, that kind of feeling. So they begin to think about what to do with the Baron, because they're all sort of unsure what the fucking point is of him being here, and what he expects of them, and how much of themselves they're going to have to put at risk in order to make him happy. So they decide that they're going to kill him. And they don't really have a plan exactly. They just figure they're going to be able to pull it off somehow. Nadja, I think, later brings up the suggestion that they just kill him in his sleep, while he's in his casket, which personally I think is the best policy. The thing that I don't really know is whether or not there are repercussions to this, because as we find out later, the Baron is not actually a baron. He is Baron, because he can't have children. And so the name was this cruel joke. And they all are talking about this while it turns out his fucking creepy familiar is right behind the door. Oh, I love that moment so much. But the Baron, because he's not an actual Baron, it sort of throws things into a different light for me. I have been assuming that he was of a status that meant, in the sort of food chain, so to speak, of vampires, that he was a higher tier than they are. And that's what they've given us to understand in their body language and their sort of genuflection, If he's not an actual Baron, then I'm assuming that's just coming from his age, simply being 1,000 years old, or however old he's meant to be, is enough to grant him that kind of esteem. If that is true, will they get in trouble for killing him? And spoilers, I was wondering this, and then I saw when I was going to play this episode just now for the recording, that the next episode is titled The Trial. So I'm like, oh, is that what that is? Are they on trial for his death? Honestly, that seems like a really smart idea. Follow that trail, because there's a lot that you can do with that storyline. First of all, are they going to go somewhere for the trial, or is the trial going to come to them? Then you get to see other people in the upper echelons of vampire society and how that works. I think that's a rich vein to tap, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I just as soon as they started talking about it, though, I was like, what kind of repercussions are there to that, though? So I really love when the Baron comes downstairs, and Laszlo's first response to what he's wearing is, he's wearing 2 ruffs. I would not have noticed that right away if he didn't say something. And honestly, guys, I have no idea if that's something that ever happened in the period or not. Styles were wild once upon a time, and wearing 2 ruffs feels like something that would definitely have happened. I can't with the ruffs. I swear, what? I wish we would bring shit like this back. I understand why we don't have these sorts of dramatic clothing anymore. Like, one, we are in a totally different, like, our living situations are very different now. And there's no... When I say living situations, I mean that there is a much smaller sort of ruling class that are meant to sort of fit in more with the peasantry, and their clothing is much less dramatic and sets them apart much less than it ever has. I mean, if you look at an outfit that, like, let's see, I'm trying to think of whether to compare a peasant like myself to actual literal royalty, or to compare me to somebody like Kim Kardashian, who I would probably consider, unfortunately, American royalty. But their clothing is not going to be markedly different in style so much as quality and cost, right? So it's a different situation. Kim Kardashian could wear a cardigan like this. She could wear a little sundress like this, and nobody would be like, what is she wearing? Oh my God. Whereas if somebody in, let's talk about the Elizabethan era, which is what his clothing really is reflecting. If somebody of a high station then wore the kinds of clothing peasants wore, it would be really obvious that was what was happening. And you'd be like, what the fuck? Why are they dressed like this? It would be so clear, you know? And so I guess that's probably why we don't do like incredibly dramatic stuff like ruffs and huge draping sleeves. I mean, that stuff probably comes into play on the red carpet a little bit, or like Met Gala, and that's it. Whereas that was sort of every day for people who were at court, right? I just miss that. And I mean miss in the sort of, you know, how there's got to be a German word for like missing something, or a nostalgia for something that was never actually of your lifetime. But I would love for like clothing that has a lot more drama and flair to become more of a thing again, except it would just be completely out of reach for me and a lot of the average people. You know, the price of it, for one thing. And for another, you don't want to wear that sort of thing when you just have a regular job as a, you know, podcaster, for example. I'm not going to wear rough. Can you imagine? I wish, though. How great would that be? I just, a little bit? Like, can't we, like, you know, like the Victorians had lace gloves. How about that? Lace gloves. There goes a look. That is a... We don't wear gloves. We don't wear hats anymore, really. Like, hats are just not as much of a thing. And I miss that sort of shit. It's just a shame. So anyway, they asked Colin to lend him some clothes. I love Colin's questions because he's asking, what size are you? And are you a jeans and t-shirt guy? But probably not shorts. The whole thing is so funny. He's just so casual about it and really treats him like an actual person versus, you know, the sort of icon of power that they're treating him as. So, guys, we have to talk about this actor. So I feel like somebody in the chat a while back mentioned that the actor who is playing the Baron is also the actor who played the Night's King. Am I mistaken here? And that he is used a lot in sort of creature costumes because he's really, really slender. And so it makes it easy to give him a sort of inhuman look. He's just so thin that it gives just enough of a base to build off of, while still having him look pretty emaciated for different roles, right? And that's certainly an aspect of this character, but the makeup without his body language would just be nothing. Truly, what he brings to this, his whole stance, is elegance, a little bit of a sort of like a feminine movement, and intense drama. Drama with like a capital D and like 3 H's at the end of it. I'm playing this in the window for those who are here in the chat with me so you guys can see when he transforms from a bat and joins them on the street. Look at his, oh my god, his hands. It's meant to imitate like the bat wings, but it's so much more than that. Oh my god, I love it so much. Kyle says he was not the Night King, but he was the fish guy in Shape of Water. I never saw that. The fish guy in Hellboy, fish guy a lot. And the bad guys that in that one silent ep of Buffy. Oh, he was one of the gentlemen. Also the fawn in Pan's Labyrinth. I did see that. You know what? He had similar sort of movements as a gentleman, now that I think about it. I can't remember the performance in Pan's Labyrinth that well. But I never saw Hellboy. No, I did see Hellboy. I just don't remember him very well. And I never saw A Shape of Water. But, okay. So, thank you very much for that information, Kyle. But yeah, so he's wandering around, you guys. He's in. I gotta, like, mention what he's wearing. He's got a plain, like, I think he's just wearing khakis and a pair of either loafers or just tennis shoes. I couldn't see his shoes that well. But he's wearing a Devil's baseball cap, which is great. And a, like, V-neck sweater with part of a high collar coming up from underneath it. So he clearly kept some of his original outfit on, but then just like pulled the sweater over it. And then over that, he has a khaki colored windbreaker with a hood that's red on the inside and just goes excellently with everything. And I love Nadja just being disgusted with the fact that he is being very indiscreet about the fact that he's a vampire, and that there's only so many times you can tell people that he's joking because look at his face. And this is one of those things where, you know, normally you could just be like, oh yeah, he's just in like costume makeup. But if you guys ran into this dude on the street, I think most of us would of course assume this is costume makeup, right? We would mostly just, if we ever ran into anybody who looked anything like this, we would think either horrific disfigurement, and I shouldn't be a dick about it, or makeup. But combine that with his overall manner, I would you know, you want to be like, okay, he's just sort of role-playing, right? But there is a point at which role-playing, there's a bit of a sort of nudge wink to it. And there isn't any of that with him. I feel like it would kind of freak me out. I'm not going to lie. And there is a point also at which makeup that's that good, and yet you're not seeing it from the other side of a movie screen, is rare. You don't run into that in the wild often. Just some dude in a fucking devil's cap walking down the street, you know? So, yeah. So they run into this guy that they know, and he asks just like, oh, who's this guy? And immediately the fucking Baron lifts this guy off the ground and is sort of like force choking him, I think. Laszlo tries to wipe his memory of what had happened. But then the Baron just does it fucking all over again. Oh my God. Yeah, he is very tiresome. I was very glad that he winds up chilling out and not, tiresome. He's got this guy lifted halfway off the ground. No, he's got him lifted a couple feet off the ground. Right out in the open. So they go to this little convenience store. Oh my God, he has the hood down. I keep forgetting. And he's talking about most of the humans we can make into food and the rest we'll make into slaves. And he's pointing at different people in this convenience store and deciding who's food and who's going to be a slave. And this is when they really start to seriously consider what they're going to do to kill him. Because at this point, as Nadja says, he's a fucking liability. So he's wandering around and eventually comes across a dude who's super, super drunk. And he drinks off of this guy. And this was the first time that I got any hint of where we were going to go with this. He drinks off of a drunk man and thus gets a little drunk himself. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fun. I'm here for this. And indeed, this begins him down a sort of party path for the rest of the evening. So he really wants to try a slice of pizza. Guys, this whole thing, a pizza pie. He keeps calling it a pizza pie. We could do shots. Oh my God. Shots of what, sir? Shots of people? Oh, that's right. He shotguns somebody in the bathroom. Yeah. I forgot that he does it this way. I kind of cut this out of my memory because it's like really awful. And they actually shut the door on the camera because it's a bit much. So this is when he talks about being barren. And he talks about how he's been sort of considering what all of this is for. And that he actually was thinking about killing all of them. And he says it in this way. He's like, I know it probably sounds odd to you all now. And Nandor gets a little bit too wrapped up. And he says something himself about how they were thinking about killing him too. And there's a long pause. It's a sort of like, you calling me a clown? You think I'm funny? What am I, amuse you? Like one of those moments where it's, you aren't sure whether this guy is about to completely like rip your head off and the head off of every other person in the room in his vicinity because you don't know what kind of temper he has. And then he starts laughing. And I was fairly certain that was what was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what the energy was going to wind up being, and I didn't know whether they were going to have the Baron be a recurring thing. So him kind of freaking out and deciding to take this a little left wouldn't have been a bad idea. I wouldn't have been mad at it, you know? So yeah, I love when Nandor says this, and Nadja just starts laughing along with him. And it takes a minute for everybody to be like, what the fuck? I think Laszlo's the first one to be like, that's a real, I can't believe that you just like said that, dude. So this is when he says he wants to take a bite of pizza pie. They all try and discourage him. I had completely forgotten that in this universe, the garlic is a problem for them. Because the classic like vampire rules are pretty much how it works in this show. So I knew that they couldn't eat, but the garlic thing didn't even occur to me. But he takes a bite of it and he starts to say the garlic burnt a little, and then he vomits to a point that it has such velocity that it propels him into the air. And this continues for some time until eventually he lands. And every time he lands, the bonelessness of his fall is really awful to watch. It's like upsetting. I kept thinking, is he dead? And they sort of do too. That happens more than once where they're like, is he dead? Is he okay? And I love after this when they're coming over to see if he's okay, and he just smiles and says, totally worth it. And that's when things really start to pop off. They're at some nightclub, and he's got fucking glow sticks, and they're listening to trance music, and he's taking hits off of people who are high, and everybody is just really, they're having a good time. I love the sort of twitchiness of all of them. Like, he gets this, and Nadja also gets this from the, like, teeth grinding thing, I'm assuming, that I think happens with, oh my god, I was gonna say Molly. Is it Molly? Or is that Speed? I think that's kind of like any upper, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, that tooth thing, I had a roommate that was doing that all the time, and she fucked her teeth up good. That's why they have those pacifiers around their neck, people who rave a lot, because they get the chewing, and they put some in their mouth to sort of keep themselves from fucking their teeth up. And then we cut to him singing karaoke, and he's singing that, oh my god, this is one of the best ones, guys, this song. It's a time of the season for loving. Boom, 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 classic. That is one of those songs that's like a little bit overused in media, like not just TV, but movies. And it still has never gotten old for me. That song is such a fucking classic. It's so good. And it's just so atmospheric. And there was a day last summer where I think I played that song like 8 times in a row. And Owen and I had it stuck in our heads for a good week solid. And every time one of us finally got it out of our head, the other one was singing it under their breath and got it back in. And we were sort of hating each other by the time it was over. I may have just restarted that trend at this point by singing it out loud. If he's out there listening, he might have heard me, and I've cursed him with the earworm again. Oh my god, guys, I forgot about this. Nadja decides to sing a cappella. This song, I'm just going to read the lyrics. There was a girl in the village. She had one very small foot. Did she lose her foot in the well? No one knows. He was a horse. Oh my god. What? I want to know. She had to just make that up on this. I wonder if that was like completely improv or what. But I want to know what the rest of it is. I really do. That was so funny. And her singing that a cappella is incredibly creepy. So they go back to the house. They're rushing to get inside before the sun fully comes up. Drunk and high as hell. And this is when they run into Colin, who's like, wow, y'all clearly had a blast. When Natcha says we missed you, he says, what? What's wrong with you? Oh my god. Look at his expression, you guys. He isn't happy. Do you guys see that? I forgot that Colin gets this expression on his face. Look at him. I thought that them saying, oh, hey, we missed you. For some reason in my like mental picture, that was sort of a nice change for him. And he was like, oh, wow, what's wrong? He isn't pleased by it at all. His expression is genuinely almost like repulsed. The Baron asks him if he's tried the pizza pie, and he looks like affronted by it. I don't know if because he feeds on their energy. Is that what's bothering him, was that he was intending to like feed on them, but they're too happy for him to do that? Because he tends to feed, as I have begun to learn, on frustration and anger, right? So maybe that's why that he like wanted his morning cup of coffee, as he puts it, where he drums on Nandor's casket, and they all walk in such great spirits that he can't feed on them at all. Maybe that's what it is. I'm curious about that. But yeah. So they go up into the attic, and there's streaks of light coming in. Now, this is a little bit... So I was confused by this, I'll say that. And it doesn't actually matter. But earlier, when the Baron makes his big entrance, there's light that, like, you know, comes in looking like lightning for his big reveal from the coffin. And it felt like it was a purposeful thing that was set up for that dramatic entrance. But then here in this scene, there's actual sunlight streaming in through the attic roof. And it's meant to be a bit of a set piece for him to, like, joke around. And he does a limbo under the light. But what happened to the lighting structure? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just thinking of it right now. And he, like, actually burns himself. He's, like, you know, throwing his hand through the light as a joke, and he burns himself, and he's just finding that hilarious. He doesn't even bothered by it. He's just like, oh my God, did you see that? I totally did it. So he's trying to get the coat off. He winds up falling down the stairs because he isn't used to the structure of a coat and also is drunk. He falls off of the balcony onto the floor below, and he survives that also. A million, like, near misses. And when he falls off the balcony, that's like pieces of wood that are very close to stakes, which he mentions. You know, he got close to being staked inadvertently. And they're all laughing and clapping at the fact that he is still alive. And then in comes Guillermo with his bouquet of roses, and just a full-on patch of sunlight streams in, and the Baron is lit on fire, and he's charcoal on the ground. Now, I'm not sure what the like, how things work in this universe. Because he isn't gone. Like I said, he's charcoal. There's a humanoid shape of blackened, like sooty, with fire coming out, like a piece of live coal. He isn't a puff of dust, like when somebody gets staked in Buffy, you know? Does this mean that he will come back? I have been calling him dead this episode, but like now that I stop and think about it, I don't know that's true. He could have just been really badly injured and eventually will recover. Like if you guys have watched Interview with a Vampire, they turn into total dust if they're hit with sunlight, but they have to be in the sunlight for like a good minute, and you can be like burned and look almost like that. And if you give yourself enough time, you come back from it and you're okay. It's just you need a long time to heal and return to your former glory. Not only time, too, you need to feed. Like that's a major part of getting healed, is being fed enough to do it. So I'm assuming that the Baron's dead, but I might be wrong about that. He might just be like an invalid now that they have to care for. And he may also be really, really angry at them. You know, I've been sort of thinking if the next episode, the trial, was in reference to his death, that it would be other people putting them on the spot to explain what happened. But what if he was the one behind it because he was like still alive enough to hold them responsible himself, or they were held responsible by having to nurse him back to health, which would suck. I don't know. I am assuming from everybody's reaction that he is dead. Because they all, I mean, I don't know, a bad injury, they would still probably react the same way. I'm going to rewatch that moment really quick because I'm just kind of trying to, oh my God. And what do they do with his fucking familiar? Because she comes out to see what's happened and looks like, you know, sort of, oh shit. But do they kill her? Do they keep her around? I'm sure it all depends, like, on whether or not he's actually alive. I'm looking now. Oh my God, Guillermo, what's that smell? And he sees the Baron. What do you think, guys? If you were watching this for the first time and you didn't know, would you assume he was dead? I'm looking at this. I think he's meant to be dead. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go with. And that's where the fucking episode ends, by the way. It's a really, like, sudden cutoff. I was taken aback when I was watching it the first time. That was a total of, how long is that? I'm trying to find, like, the runtime here. 19 minutes and, like, 20 seconds. A very short episode. Or it felt really short. Maybe the others aren't actually longer. But this felt really short to me. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not going to go look now at run times of the other ones. But I was genuinely sort of surprised. But yeah, so it all depends on whether or not he's still alive. I think he's meant to be dead. Having him be half alive and them having to nurse him back to health would also be a good, like, interesting thing to investigate with the story. But having him be dead and that they're held responsible for that feels like an easier route to take, while also getting him out of their hair directly and freeing them up to do other things. So, and also giving us more of a look into, like, the vampire hierarchy of this universe too. So, yeah. I think he has to be dead for best story direction. I feel like, am I forgetting anything? I played this while I was recording, but I'm, like, a little under time here. And I feel like I'm pretty much done talking about this one because, again, it was sort of short. But yeah, thank you, Robin, very much for commissioning this. I really appreciate it. I'm just sad that the next episode won't be until September. And so, I mean, I'm probably going to watch pretty soon to see what, you know, whether or not he was alive, but I won't be able to record on it until then. I'm not going to be able to take the suspense. And by the time the next episode comes out, the newest season will either be dropping soon or will have dropped already, because I know I saw that the next season was coming out this September. So I know I've asked before how many seasons there are of this show, but I think this is going to be the third one that's coming out, or maybe it's even further along than that. So Jan says the third is the one that's coming out. Okay. I'm wondering because the commissions for this show have probably been the laggiest, other than, like, Awaken, which is being commissioned by one person by themselves. So that one's probably the slowest. But I am hoping that I get to, like, finish the series, but I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. It doesn't feel like this series is as popular. People were really excited to hear that I was covering it, but it doesn't feel like that many people are wanting to commission episodes of it, because other stuff is taking priority. So, you know, let me know, guys, what you think, and I'm going to keep an eye out for how long there is between episodes. Of course, there's a 3-month maximum. And even if we pass the 3-month mark on certain titles, I give people the benefit of the doubt because sometimes it happens and I'll still keep it going. But if it continues to be, like, really sort of this staggered out, you know, July to September, and that's a long time. So, let's see, it's September 14th. So, about, I guess it's not hard, because we're on July 30th now, so a month and a half. I guess that could be worse. But, you know, it's been, like I said, since March, and I'm only on episode 6 here. So, I really just, I hope that this one keeps up, because I have been really enjoying this one. And I know Owen gets frustrated because he wants to watch the next one and he has to wait for me in order to do it. So he's going to be really annoyed when he finds out the next one is just September. Oh, well, that's what happens. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap. But again, thank you, Robin, so much. Thank you, Kyle and Jan in the chat for giving me some information. Appreciate you. And I will see you in September with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.